What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Konoha raised his siblings as legends and trained Naruto to be their servant? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. Naruto sighed heavily as he leaned back against his apartment wall, letting his mind wander back to the master test he had just failed. He needed a slave, but nearly all of them were claimed by the Uchiha. The testers had given him an indefinite extension on collaring a slave, but to do so he was listed as a free target until he collared a slave of his own. What that meant basically was that until he got someone to wear his collar, he was free game for every master and mistress out there. Not that many of them wanted him for their own, but a few had already made attempts on him. It appeared that his years of playing pranks had served him well, in that not a single one had been able to catch him before he made it to the safety area of his apartment. And with several Anbu guards watching over the place, it was relatively safe. Relativity is such a curse sometimes. He knew for a fact that the free target program, established by Danzo, was a one-way ticket to hell. First there was the simple fact that Hinata-sama had offered her own little sister as her trained slave at the exams, something that had pissed off the observer Neji-sama to no end. Second, there were the rumors of the root dungeon that haunted the slave class, a place where the rules and laws governing slave rights did not exist, and any slave sent there would come out nothing more than a slut. A broken, useless being with only the most basic of social functionality. Pushing off the wall, he decided to make the most of the mandated 10 hours of safety he had. A cup of ramen later and he was stretched out on his bed, trying to get the 4 hours of sleep he needed to be at his best in the morning. If he was able to skip out before dawn, the Danzo supporters shouldn't be able to catch him as he emerged. After all, they couldn't catch him after the sun goes down, until it rose the next morning. He could get a head start on the capture squads during those hours. That night his dreams were interrupted as he emerged in a dank, foul-smelling sewer. Wandering around, he found a large caged-off area with a glowing pair of eyes looking down at him. "Well, if it isn't my master. Kyuubi," Naruto muttered in shock. The greatest of the tailed demons, the one killed by the fourth supreme master himself, Minato Namikaze, was sitting in a cage right before him, calling him master. "Okay, the crazy train can stop now, he'd like to get off. Indeed, it is I, Kyuubi. Forced to live inside you forever. Your bitch of a mother left me chained on top of being caged. The whore's little parting shot, I suppose." Kyuubi snarled as he tugged against the chains currently holding him back from the cage walls. "And now I have to deal with her little bastard son. Please tell me you're not interested in being a master. You would be a delicious little meat slave." If Naruto hadn't been previously interested in being a master, he sure as fuck wasn't going to allow this ugly as sin piece of shit consider him being a slave. "Shut up, slave. I'm your master and you're going to listen to me or I will leave you chained up forever. Get a brain, you meatbag. I'm already fucking chained up forever as long as you draw breath. Try threatening me with something that actually might matter." Kyuubi snapped while pulling against the chains, preventing it from devouring the flesh pod in front of the cage containing it. "I should have expected nothing better from such a pathetic waste of flesh as you." Pathetic, that's it. Naruto snapped as he slammed his fist into the cage door. "You want to make me angry? Well, if this is a dream or not, it's still my mind, and that means I'm in control." For the first time in a few millenniums, Kyuubi was surprised as the area around it was first ripped clean of bars and chains. In fact, Kyuubi was standing alone in the middle of an open barren area, but before it could act, something happened to it. It began shrinking, its furs shedding off it, only to disappear in thin air. By the time it was done shrinking, she was bare naked, and human, with a collar around her neck marking her as Naruto's property. What have you done? I'm going to kill you." Before she could even get close to the blonde, she was blasted by balls of black, which wrapped over her body in layers of latex 3 inches thick, causing even the strength of Kyuubi to falter and hold her in place. As around her various implements of torture and torment appeared from nothingness, she was raised into the air, chains snaking around her body as though they were alive. The chains formed a harness over her latex-clad form, and then latched itself onto the corners of a cage that appeared out of nowhere again. As the cage settled on chain supports that ran to a ceiling high above, Naruto was surprised as a masked female appeared between them clad in the garb of a high mistress that walked over towards the bound form of Kyuubi. "You look a whole lot better like that. Who's the whore now, slave?" the woman whispered softly as Kyuubi stiffened. She turned to look at Naruto and bowed her head towards the young male. "Welcome, master. I will serve you in training this little slave," the woman answered while rubbing her hands over the latex-clad woman. "I must say I approve of your tastes." Thanks. Who are you?" Naruto asked curiously while forming nose and ear holes on the latex for Kyuubi, while adding in ears and a tail. It seemed like a good idea to tease her with something that she'd lost in his fit of rage. "I am unimportant, just know that I am your loyal servant, and I will train Kyuubi into an ideal little slave for you," the woman offered while stroking over where the eyes and mouth on the suit should be. "If you wouldn't mind, please free these two areas." Naruto shook his head before waving a hand across the room. The vague shapes he had summoned before the latex blinded the Kyuubi started solidifying into actual implements he'd seen during class. A square shape turned into a rack of paddles and riding crops with a flayed flogging whip hanging off one end. An X off to one side was turned into a cross-form rack with clamps for the wrists, ankles and midsection. Several others were given solid, tangible shape before Naruto turned to Kyuubi and the mistress that was offering her services to him. "Now, how do I give you power to act as my agent here, lady?" Naruto asked curiously as he reached over and wiped away two eye holes, and traced a zipper into place over the mouth, still firmly in the zipped closed position. "Why? You want to give me power over your mind? That is a dangerous game," the woman answered, her mask hiding most of the shock. With a small shrug she decided to answer him. "Think it and it shall be done, good Master Uzumaki." "Very well, lady," Naruto stated with a smile as he summoned hair on Kyuubi's head, turning it a burnt orange like she had as a monster fox. "You are to act as my representative. Any action against me you take will cause a failing in your powers, as well as a punishment." "Very wise indeed, Master Uzumaki. I shall serve you to the best of my abilities. Now you should awaken, master," the woman answered with pride apparent in her voice. "I shall work on her while you are away." Naruto smiled at the woman and nodded his agreement. "Thank you, lady. As for you, Kyuubi, enjoy your new slavery, even if I can't claim you as mine yet. I will never let you free." As Naruto faded from view, he caught the briefest sight of pepper red hair spilling out from behind the mask, swirling out into a dangerous aura. Once he was gone, the masked mistress unlocked the cage and pulled the kitsune out. "Oh, how much I wish I could have done this when I was your host slave." A jerk of chains had Kyuubi being forced over to the rack against all will she could muster to fight against them. Perhaps she hadn't thought out her taunting of Naruto as well as she had previously thought, and knowing this new mistress, she was going to regret every minute of it. Letting out a panicked whine as she was clamped down facing the rack, her arms and legs being pulled out until she matched the shape exactly. She could almost swear that she heard the mistress purr softly as the sound of leather being unfurled filled her ears. "You're mine now, and every last dirty word you ever spoke about me, my husband, or my son will be repaid. Now you are nothing but a slave, and I am the mistress," the woman whispered softly into the former fox demon's ear softly. That is all you need to know." If anyone else had been in the room, they would have heard the crack of thunder brought about by a whip tearing open the layers of latex with ease, and slightly muffled howls of pain through the still zipped latex covering the fox girl's mouth as the mistress got her revenge on the beast that had insulted her so much when they had last met. But no one did, and even if they could have, no rules were being broken, so they would have left the mistress to punish the unruly slave. Naruto for his part woke up in his apartment, just before the alarm he'd set beside him could go off. Stopping it from ringing, he pulled himself up off the ground and walked in the dark to his bathroom. A cold shower later, he was ready to face the day. All he needed to do was get to the Supreme Master Mountain Dungeon and ask Sarutobi about what he'd just witnessed. It sounded like something out of those Master Space legends he used to read when bored of homework. Maybe he could get out of town for a few days while he was at it. The stone monolith, or mountain dungeon to Naruto, was a secret lair for only the highest-ranking mistresses and masters to see, outside of being bound and gagged into service as a slave to the Supreme Master. Few people that walked through the iron-bound gates at the base of the mountain walked out of there without a collar about their neck. That's why Naruto was going through the small shack entrance at the top of the mountain. The long, boring, and almost tedious elevator ride down from the top of the mountain to the first layer of the dungeon was only compounded by the terrible music that played lightly out of the speakers. Oh yeah, once he became the Supreme Master, he was changing that music to something not mind-numbingly moronic. Arriving at the first layer, he walked through the dimly lit dungeon, seeing all the empty shackles lining the halls, while every empty room punctuated the need for someone to fill this area with the moans of their slaves. "Hey G-san? You around? I need to talk to you." "In here Naruto-kun," Supreme Master Sarutobi answered from the room he used as an office. Naruto picked up his pace and got to the office as fast as he could. The last room on the left was the one Sarutobi had taken over, and that's where Naruto found him with his feet on the back of some hooded slave that knelt before him. "What seems to be the matter, Naruto-kun?" "Hey G-san. Well, it's like this. I had this weird dream that sounded like those weird Master Space legends you told me about." Naruto started, before stopping as Sarutobi's eyes nearly bugged out of his skull. "And, I'm guessing you know about Kyuubi then. I was unaware that it would allow you in until after you claimed the master title. And I had meant to discuss this with you before then." Sarutobi answered before taking a calming puff from his pipe, setting the bowl into an ashtray held by a slim tube going to the slave's mouth. "Tell me about your dream, Naruto-kun. Have a seat too." Naruto settled into a seat that seemed to be molded from a few of the bustier slaves in Sarutobi's collection. Leaning back against the padded pillows that replaced the chests, Naruto sighed and began the tale. Sarutobi seemed surprised at the mention of the strange woman, and looked suspiciously knowledgeable about her when the young blonde mentioned the activities of her red hair. After a moment's silence, Sarutobi let out a sigh and shook his head. "I cannot tell you much about what is going on. But I suspect, lady, as you have named her, could not be a better choice in training Kyuubi." "Oh, yeah, so, she's not a bad person like Danzo?" Naruto asked nervously, just realizing how much he could be screwed if she was. "No, she would never do anything to hurt you. If she offers you lessons, learn as much as you can from her. Also, I think you should talk to her more once Kyuubi is more tamed," the wizened Supreme Master answered while stroking his chin in thought. "Is there anything further, Naruto?" "Well, I thought if I was going to have these weird dreams for a while, I should get out of town until they were done. Or I'm more used to them." Naruto answered while scratching the back of his head. Shifting in his seat, he sighed heavily and shook his head. "But if this really is a master seal on my body, I shouldn't be alone. Why don't you go with Lord Master Kakashi while he checks out reports of violations to the free trade agreements in Wave? I'll even get his agreement to not collar you while on the mission. Who knows, you might even find yourself a little slave of your own." Sarutobi offered warmly while pulling up a file folder from a bin next to his chair. "It should be safe and easy, so I'll only pay you for a one-crop mission." Naruto's eyes widened as he realized just what was being offered to him. A fully sanctioned master's mission before he even had his first slave. This was unheard of before. And he would be paid a master's wage for it. So sweet. That'd be awesome, G-san. "Thanks," Naruto exclaimed happily while resisting hugging the Supreme Master. After all, neither of them were into guys, and Naruto'd grown out of the phase where such hugs were acceptable. After he'd settled down, his mind triggered another question that he'd always wondered about on his arrival to the mountain dungeon. Why is this level always empty? "Oh, that? You'll find out after you bring your first slave here. That's the deal," Sarutobi stated calmly with a warm smile on his face. "Now how about we go meet up with Kakashi down at the level 3 gates?" The trip down to level 3 was short, and they stopped off in a room long enough to pick up a supplies scroll, which Naruto was told was his to keep. Opening it, Naruto found it had a prankster's wet dream of supplies ready for him, along with a massive load of kunai, shuriken, and several master's tools. Oh, yeah, this was going to be great. Tucking the scroll into a set of clips on his belt, he finally met the Lord Master Kakashi with the half-asleep Tanzo at the gates. It seemed that they were ready to go, waiting only for him. "Who's the brat? He looks like he's going to slow us down." Before Naruto could snap back a reply, Kakashi cleared his throat and Sarutobi answered. "He is one of my most prized pupils, that I have supreme faith in will bring about a swift completion to this mission." Naruto felt a blush burn his cheeks as Sarutobi praised him. making it seem more like he was the private apprentice of the Supreme Master instead of some master that just barely passed his trials. The trio set off, Naruto smiling as the sun warmed his face, and the echoes of displeasure filled the air from the other side of the mountains they had just left from. It seemed that the free hunters had just found out that he wasn't home, and probably getting told from the Anbu guards that he went on a master's mission. Oh, they were probably livid, and would take it out of his hide if they ever caught him, before he collared a slave. Not like he'd let them collar him, but it was nice to be wanted, he supposed. Naruto was pleasantly surprised when he fell asleep into a dungeon hallway instead of a sewer. Walking down the halls, he smiled as his footsteps echoed down throughout the entire area. Getting to the main dungeon, he found Lady was sitting in front of a bound and gagged Kyuubi riding a bondage horse riding up between her now bared lips. The masked mistress was eating a well-done steak in front of the bound fox woman. "Hello lady, how's it going?" Naruto asked as he walked up next to the mistress currently teasing the former fox demon. "It seems that you two are adjusting nicely." "Oh Naruto-sama, I was just stopping for a few to have some dinner. Would you care to join me?" Lady answered with a smile from behind her mask, which made Naruto wonder how she was eating the steak, but decided against asking. "I think that she will be ready for me to train you on soon." Well, at least she's not as fond of bad words anymore. Naruto settled in and waved off the offered steak, not being hungry at the moment. He looked over the bound fox woman a little closer, noticing that her eyes were forced open and foxes on the steak in front of her. "No thank you, I just came to check in on you too." "Oh that's so sweet, thank you. As you can see we're perfectly happy here, at least I am," Lady stated before slacking the chains that hung at her side, causing Kyuubi to settle further on the horse with a moan. "I think it's time for your first lesson. You're human, but your slaves are too. Try to avoid acting in anger when you can. Haste may cause you to regret your actions later, isn't that right Kyuubi? Go screw yourself, you know you loved exploiting my healing factor for all it was worth." Kyuubi started before Kushina's stroking of a flogger caused her to cut herself off with a whimper. Naruto frowned as he watched the fox woman's actions. "I think she's being a little too uppity. Let's change her name. What was it she called me?" "Ah yes, Fleshbag," Naruto mused thoughtfully as he stroked his chin in thought. It didn't really sit with him as proper though, so he felt something else was needed. Maybe just Kitsune or something. What do you think lady? Naruto could almost swear the face on the mask broke into a predatory grin as she stood up and walked over to Kyuubi, reaching up and pulling down on her collar. The added pressure to her nether lips caused the bound woman to let out another moan as a shiver rippled over her body. "Very good Master Naruto. A fitting name for her. After all, she's no longer the nine-tailed godhood of abomination that she once was. Now she's just a one-tailed kitsune in a slave's hood. Oh how deliciously fitting." As Lady turned away Naruto saw a new tag with the word kitsune stamped on it dangling from the front loop of the collar. "And I must commend you for not choosing a name out of anger. I know how tempting it must have been. Well I think this is better, since she's no longer Kyuubi no Kitsune, but instead just a kitsune," Naruto stated while chuckling softly. "Not even a single tail to her name, isn't that a shame? To have fallen so far, and yet, she remembers her former glory." Naruto turned to walk out as Kyuubi growled darkly, her rage building until Lady smacked her across the ass, causing her to let out a scream that seemed a strange mix of arousal, pain, and rage. "Keep up the good work lady, maybe someday she could earn a tail." "Oh, I think she has a long time before that's possible." Naruto woke up the following morning before the sun rose again, his eyes adjusting to the dim light of the embers from the campfire. Sitting up slowly he rolled out the knots in his neck and found his eyes meeting up with Kakashi's good one. "Morning, hey there, sleep well?" Kakashi asked lazily while Naruto woke up his still tired body. Naruto sighed heavily as he shook his head slowly. "I feel like I overslept. How long was I out?" 5 hours. Kakashi answered with a slightly mystified tone to his voice. He added a log to the fire, letting it catch before he settled down on a pad of his own while closing his good eye. "If you don't mind, I'd like to get some sleep, since there's still another 8 hours before dawn." "Sure Kakashi, I'll keep quiet," Naruto answered while looking at the steadily snoring traitor that had done nothing but complain for the entire previous day. Oh, how he would like to have taught him some manners, but Kakashi suggested that he try it without the whips and chains this time. And so Naruto worked on being polite and guiding the nearly perpetually drunk trader into being more social. He'd had moderate success after blowing up the booze, not that he'd been caught doing it, mind you. The snapping of a twig caught Naruto's attention and forced him to focus on the surroundings. There was just something off about the area, and he knew that someone was out there. An evil smirk spread over his face as he slipped into the darkness. Something inside him caused him to focus points in his lower back, 9 points that he couldn't figure out why they were specified. Finding 2 people, he crouched in behind a tree. There's the traitor. Let's capture him and kill the other 2. Oh, that was just the right trigger, he snarled as a red cloak surrounded him and 9 lengths of chains shot out of his back, binding the 2 in tight, nearly suffocating cocoons. Well, that was useful. Naruto mused as he walked out of the woods, into the campfire area, where Kakashi was waiting for him, alert and at the ready. Sorry about that, Kakashi. I didn't even think to wake you up. Yeah, don't worry about it. Who are your friends? Kakashi asked curiously as he pointed at the 2 breathing mask-wearing men currently held in his chains. I dunno. Didn't get their names, just that they were going to try and kill us. You wanna ask? I'm still kinda new to all this. Naruto offered lamely while pointing at the pair that were now leaking fluids out the bottom of the chains. Oh come on, now I have to wash them. Let me take them off your chains for you. Kakashi offered as he pulled out chains of his own. Naruto simply shrugged and set them on the ground, cutting off the chakra flow to the chains, and to his surprise separating them from his body instead of making them disappear. Thank you. I'll go talk to them. Have fun. I'm waking up Tanzo and asking him some questions myself. Naruto answered as he turned to the sleeping trader. After Kakashi left, Naruto only had one thought enter his mind. This was going to be fun. Getting answers out of Tanzo was a lot easier than the captured duo. Or at least that's what Naruto thought. Especially since Naruto only had to tie Tanzo down to a log and break out a paddle before he started singing like a songbird about Gato, wave, the oppression, his unhealthy fascination with feet, the shoe size of everyone in his family, and the names and addresses of every girl in the village that was on the market and their preferences. Fortunately, Naruto was able to sort through all the excess to get to the immediately useful information. Some of the rest he just filed away for future use. After all, he was a hormonal and normal boy. And while he was waiting for Kakashi to arrive from questioning the duo, he listened to Tanzo crying for mercy and screaming out any information he thought Naruto might find useful. He was half tempted to paddle the traitor just to shut him up already. Kakashi returned halfway through the telling of Tanzo's life story, tucking 2 black scrolls with the Konoha seals into a lacquered box. Didn't expect to be using these today. I only brought a handful just in case something went mildly wrong. Pausing, he seemed to finally notice that Tanzo was going on about something or other. So, did he give you any particular reasons why some mercenaries are out to kill us? Or was he just useless? Naruto sighed as he pulled himself up from where he'd been resting against a tree. Mostly useless. He did mention some conglomerate mogul named Gato locking down all of Wave's shipping, while he's building a bridge to the mainland. That sounds like an illegal group moving into the area. I hope it's an illegal scroll group, those are easy. But it sounds more like a black market for slave trading. Kakashi grumbled while settling down next to the fire, pinching a nerve on Tanzo's neck to shut him up in mid-word. They move in, seal off the lines of trade, and then jack up prices on everything until they have to sell their children off to afford food and other essentials. That's horrid. Naruto growled, his eyes taking on a red hue as he thought of forcing families to sell off their children whether they wanted in the lifestyle or not, just so the others could survive. That wasn't right, that wasn't what this was about. That was just like in the Dark Ages. Slaves stripped naked and paraded about for public auction right in front of the family. Worse still, the illegals only give the family a marginal amount. Probably enough to afford food for a week, Kakashi explained while pointing to a spot across the fire from him. Sit down, calm down, and listen. We might have to fight other masters when we get to Wave, so I want to be sure you know what to do in a master's duel. Naruto sighed and settled into the indicated spot. A quick scrub of his face and a search of his memories pulled up the information he'd read about after being kicked out of class for breathing too loudly. Master's duels. is a combat between two masters in which the wagered stakes are usually slaves chosen by the opposing masters prior to combat. Any and everything can go in such duels, but it is frowned upon to kill the opponent unless they've broken the code. In which case all properties they owned are given to the victor, usually after a small justicar's fee when officially sanctioned. Good, it seems you're familiar with the general rules. We're going to be fighting unsanctioned masters duels most likely. Which means it's not just our properties on the line, but ourselves as well. I'm going to count you as my sub-master for the rest of this mission. That means in duels you can not only aid me, but fight in my stead. Kakashi explained with a heavy tone of voice. His eye looked distant and unfocused for a minute, before returning to sharp focus on Naruto. Now, I only have a few minor slaves with me, and my dungeon's deed. I have my apartment's deed and, myself. Naruto answered after a moment's pause, and Kakashi's subtle hand waved to find what Naruto owned. The look of pure shock on Kakashi's face would have had Guy proclaiming that Naruto would be his eternal rival from that moment forth. But thankfully we dodged that bullet. You're kidding, right? Kakashi asked dryly as he stirred the fire slowly. At Naruto's sheepish look, Kakashi debated trying to strangle Sarutobi, before remembering that this was supposed to be a no-combat mission. Guess not. We'll try and keep you out of combat as much as possible. The rest of the night was spent planning out the rest of the journey. Thankfully for the both of them, the next day was uneventful, and Naruto got to sleep first. After all, he only needed 4 hours, unlike Kakashi that wanted to get at least 6. As expected, he arrived in the dungeons where he'd always found Kitsune and Lady waiting for him. The rose petals on the approach were a nice touch, as were the wall sconces lighting the way. What he found curious was the small fact that Lady was sitting back, watching a strange device he didn't remember leaving here when he left. You'd think he'd remember a padded table with 2 ankle shackles, chest straps, and entire arm binders. All of which were currently holding Kitsune down while she squirmed painfully around with a swollen stomach and a plug firmly between her cheeks. Do I want to ask Lady? Oh, she was being a little problematic. So I am correcting it for her. She has another 10 minutes to go. Something on your mind, Master? Lady asked with a casual indication of Kitsune. Yeah, I did something strange today, and wondered if you knew anything about it. Naruto started, before explaining the fight he'd gotten into shortly after his last departure. Anything you can figure out about it? Naruto noticed that Lady was strangely silent, while shifting nervously in her seat. Kitsune seemed to be snickering behind the ball gag that was currently silencing her. I remember once meeting a family of masters and mistresses that could do something like that. They were from the country of Whirlpool, the clan Uzumaki. I suspected you might have been related to them, but I couldn't say until I was sure. I'm sorry. It's okay. I can just get trained from them, I guess. Naruto answered with a shrug. I just wanted to know more about it. See? That would be difficult as you are the last one alive. Lady stated softly, while wrapping the boy into a hug. I can try to help you train if you'd like, as I saw them in action. Lady broke the hug and walked over to Kitsune, who was still snickering behind the gag, at least until Lady pressed down on the distended stomach firmly. Then her snickers turned into moans of pain as the added pressure reminded her of her current punishment. And what made you think you could laugh like that? Just make sure you don't do anything permanently damaging to her, okay? I've grown fond of Kitsune. Naruto ordered while stroking the bound woman's cheek lightly, wiping up a slight trail of drool while he was at it. Petting her head lightly, he smiled at the glare she was shooting him. She is rather cute, isn't she? Is there a way I can talk to you without having to fall asleep? I mean, it's useful being able to learn from a skilled mistress such as yourself, but sometimes I figure I'll need to ask you questions that I can't wait until bedtime for. Naruto asked curiously as he caressed the poor girl's ass cheeks gently, flicking his fingers over the plug teasingly. We will see. I will do what I can to contact you while you're awake. Lady answered after watching Naruto play with the still severely pained bound and gagged Kitsune for a few minutes. Speaking of which, it's time for me to wake up. Naruto countered while he felt a subtle tug on his body, alerting him to the end of his sleep cycle. Until tomorrow, Master. Lady said as she took a firm hold on the plug and prepped to yank it out, right before Naruto vanished. Well, that could have gone better, Naruto thought as he collapsed in the room Kakashi and he were borrowing from Tanzo. First, some sword-swinging psycho with compensation issues flung a blade easily longer than Kakashi was tall at them. Then the psycho showed up wearing his puffed-out pajama pants. And enough belts to put your average Justicar to shame. And the oiled skin. Oh god, why couldn't he forget the oiled skin? So Kakashi and he got into this huge fight, with whips, water, paddles, water, blades, water, lightning, water, fire, water, and did he mention water yet? 'Cause there sure was enough of that sloshing about, zipping through the air like crazy. Then again, what could he expect from a rogue master out of the Mizu no Kuni? Land of watersport, more like it. Speaking of Justicars, just as Kakashi was about to lock Zabuza into a scroll, one of them from Mizu arrived to arrest Zabuza. There was something about her that bothered him though. She had the right outfit, and the black scrolls on her belt looked official. But once she sprang away with Zabuza, the feeling of something not being right settled into his gut and began gnawing away at his mind. He just couldn't place it. Pulling out one of his own scrolls in thought, he finally figured out what it was. There were no seals on it, they were just black. Noticed that, did you? Kakashi asked from where he had been laid out after using his Sharingan eye for so long. So, that means, we're not done yet, are we? Not likely. And I'm in no shape to pick it back up. Kakashi mused while staring at the ceiling above him tiredly. I don't even have the energy to release a couple of slaves to help out around here. We're going to have to get you some training, but I need to think about it tonight. Get your 4 hours of sleep in, and then keep watch or something, just let me rest. I'm not ready to go to sleep yet. Naruto answered while levering himself up off the ground. I think I will see if I can't find out more about the situation here while you rest. I'll keep my gear with me, but I'm going to try and just slip into the people. Pulling out his scrolls, he flicked his wrist and was lost behind the swirl of parchment and chakra. When they disappeared, Naruto was standing before Kakashi in the rattiest, most dingy clothing anyone could imagine. Not bad, Naruto. Take care and don't get caught. Kakashi ordered tiredly before passing out. Naruto smirked as he slipped out of the room's window, securing it shut with a master's seal after he got through. Anyone trying to force their way in was going to be in for a rude surprise when they were bound in a large rubber bouncy ball. Satisfied that Lord Master Kakashi would be safe and secure for the time being. It was far easier than he imagined to disappear into the crowds. Keeping his head down and just blending in came almost second nature to him. All he needed now was some local to talk to. Okay, the line of naked youths tied together by their necks were out. As were the obviously rich foreigners looking them over. But, there, that girl right there. She was looking with pity on the slave line. She could be the right one to help him out. He just had to talk to her. Excuse me, ma'am, do you know someone there? Naruto asked curiously while settling in next to her. After all, she seemed to be local as well, if just a bit cleaner than most, and that would be a likely guess for why she was watching the slave line with pity, and Naruto could see just hints of disgust and fear in her eyes. What? Oh no sir. I'm familiar with lines like these. The woman his age answered while reaching up to rub her neck nervously. I'm Haku, and you are? Naruto. The blonde offered, smiling warmly as he observed her quietly. I'm glad you escaped your line. They're kinda disgusting, aren't they? Treating people like nothing more than flesh bags. Haku's eyes widened as Naruto's voice took a hard tone, turning to follow his eyes to where the sign posted that the auction would be next week. A true master would show these filths the end of a whip. Or bring in a justy. She whispered before she realized what she had said. To her relief, Naruto seemed to have completely missed it while he judged the line before them. Naruto for his part was silently agreeing with Haku about that assessment. His hands twitched to go for his flogger, and hunt down the slime gato that was running this reign. But he had to play the part of a local, not the master right now. There was several things he took in about the line, but the one thing he failed to notice was Haku's soft brown eyes looking into his, and seeing the true power the short blonde held. It was daunting, dominating, and magnificent. I'm sorry, what was that? Naruto asked suddenly, and the dominant entity that she'd seen was gone, replaced by the curious man that had started talking to her. But she could see it still lingering in the back of his eyes, behind the mask of curiosity. I was just saying, I wish someone would do something. Haku answered softly as she pulled back into the shadows. Naruto walked with her, keeping her shielded by his body as much as he could. He felt that she needed to remain away from the line as much as possible. She was a good target to be taken into the line and sold to the highest bidder without someone watching out for her. She'd already been through it once before, and that's more than enough. Haku was thinking about the dominant feel Naruto gave off. Oh, how she wished she could have that type of power. But she couldn't submit to him, not now, not ever. She had her mission, and he was the enemy. He hadn't broken any of the rules, so she couldn't act against him, but she could use him. I should get the herbs I was looking for. What herbs are that? Flame root and lungwort. Haku answered, getting surprised when he didn't look completely lost at the names of the plants. In fact, he looked more like he was deep in thought. I think I saw good ground for them to the north of town. There's a corpse of pine trees that you can see from the southern grove. They're usually a good signal of the ground they prefer, Naruto explained while guiding the girl out of town towards the north. I'll help you get some. For some reason, Haku couldn't even figure out a way to get Naruto to leave her be. In fact, it felt nice that she was staying with him. It was safe, warm, and comfortable. She also knew that he would protect her, should any of those slavers attempt to come after her. A small smile spread over her lips as she realized just how nice it was to be with Naruto as they looked for the herbs. The rest of the trip was spent in companionable silence as they wandered in the woods. Naruto was deep in thought about what he'd seen in town, and the deplorable conditions those slaves in line were in. Half of them looked starved, one of them had a split lip that was still healing, and most of them had whip and cut marks over their bodies. He had to report this back to Kakashi so they could plan their next move. Haku on the other hand was thinking about her own mission, and how Naruto was making it harder by just being himself. Not an evil, heartless master that would sell their slaves for laughs. Why couldn't he be evil? That would make it so much easier to know that she would have to break him for Master Zabuza. Maybe Master Zabuza would allow her to keep him as a slave of her own? Haku was surprised when Naruto reached down and clipped the flame root with his 2 fingernails. After all, it had a thick wooden stem, and he pinched it off like it was butter. How? Oh, that? The stem segments, so if you pinch it right above that, it'll pop apart easily, Naruto explained while pointing to the part of the plant that he'd pinched off, barely showing any stress at all. It's all about knowing the pressure to use and the right time to act. Not too hard and not too soft. Naruto turned to look at the sun curiously, before he sighed and shook his head. I have to go. I hope your friend gets better soon. Haku blinked as Naruto ran off, finding herself having only one question to ask. How did he know about Master? Naruto found it a bit more than a little irksome arriving in the dungeon again. He'd like to have normal dreams again. Like maybe that one about him. A bowl of ramen the size of an Olympic swimming pool, and a harem of cute girls sunning themselves around him as he swims. Now he just had to go talk with Lady and Kitsune. Maybe he'll stick around for a little longer this time. He found Lady locking the cage of Kitsune, leaving her floating in the middle of the iron barred-off area, being suspended by chains. At least he thought it was Kitsune being bound in that inflated latex suit, with a large air-filled tail dangling down limply. Giving her some time off, are we, lady? Naruto asked with a smile as the mistress locked the cage close. Yes, Master Uzumaki, she has been good in her training today, so I'm giving her a rest. Lady informed him, slipping the key behind her mask with ease. Is there anything you wish of me, sir? Walk with me. I'd like to have a look around today, Naruto suggested while waving to the doorway that had formed since the last time he was here. Over the top of the arch was stylized script which read, "There's a new submissive born every minute." Something about that phrase just drew his attention, and made him want to see what was inside. For the first time he'd heard Lady make a sound that didn't give off the aura of control and command that she'd always had since they'd met. Giving her a moment to regain herself, he pressed on, letting the question of what she'd seen to cause the slip fade into the back of his mind. Instead he arrived in one of the strangest rooms he'd ever seen before. It was barren, save for a lavender egg, and a chocolate brown egg. Walking over to the 2 eggs, he tenderly stroked each one, hearing a soft musical moan coming from under his fingers. What are these? Submissive spirits that want you to be their dominant, came a response from behind him, causing him to whirl on his heel and stare in shock at the man that stood before him. White latex bodysuit with matching cape and mask, all trimmed on the bottoms by red flames. Even as he watched, the figure knelt down before him, in an act of supplication. Greetings my creator. I am your master's spirit. I have chosen a form based off the master you most admire, the fourth supreme master of Konoha, Minato Namikaze. Yeah, where'd lady go? Naruto asked cautiously, knowing that the more voices in his head, the less likely it will be to pass his next guild-mandated psychological evaluations. And do you have a name? The one you refer to as lady is unable to enter here. I am sorry, but it is the rule of this chamber, the spirit answered, still having not risen an inch from his spot. As for my name, I suppose that Naruto would be redundant, but I believe you have a name for me. It took a moment, but Naruto's frazzled psyche finally came up with the name for the personification of his master's spirit. Arise Flash, and tell me more about this chamber. The so-named Flash rose from his kneeling position and in a sweeping gesture indicated the entire area. This realm is yours to craft as you see fit my creator. As you had with the chamber housing Kitsune, you may do with here as you will, but the eggs cannot be tampered with during their stages. Stages? Are they like cocoons on a caterpillar or something? Naruto asked, gently running his fingers over the two eggs lightly, letting their melody fill the background emptiness to the room. Slowly his hands stopped and he looked down at them and thought. I shouldn't be touching them if that's the case. Oh no my creator, no, they are yours to touch as you please in this stage. You just cannot puncture them, nor view the contents until you are ready. The next stage, when you are ready for it, will limit what you are able to do, as the spirit will be especially fragile at that point. Flash explained while walking over to stand next to the master of the realm. As I am your manifestation here, I will act as your second in command, and monitor the status here. That's cool, Naruto murmured before stroking the two eggs again gently. I want to protect them, they're calling out to me. Yes my creator. As their master you are the one they love, the one they trust above all others. The flame-licked spirit explained while summoning up a chair to sit in out of the nothingness. I should warn you. The submissive spirit is different than you might expect my creator. Naruto stopped his stroking of the eggs and looked over at the seated version of himself curiously. He'd not expected much at this point, maybe seeing the person that belonged to the egg when it hatched. Slowly the pieces began falling into place as he figured things out in his mind. They're going to be what they desire to be. Not what they are to the outside world, aren't they? He could almost see the smile from Flash through the mask as he nodded. That is correct my creator, very astute. Naruto seemed more intent to rub and play with the eggs of the submissive spirits in his care. The melodies of beautiful moans created such a wonderful song that he couldn't help but love it. Any ideas who they are? No my creator, I have no knowledge of their names, but I have a suspicion about the brown one. Flash answered while indicating the one he'd mentioned. I must commend you on your deft handling of the one named Haku earlier. It was a masterful awakening of the submissiveness in her. But I didn't, did I? I mean I just talked to her and helped her find those herbs and stuff. I didn't do anything like they taught us in class. Naruto asked in confusion as he leaned against the lavender egg gently, drawing forth a moan of pleasure that sent shivers up his spine. Faye, those fools that are in charge of teaching you masters these days. Remember what a true master is. Defender of their slaves, love of their lives, bringer of their hopes and dreams. You have awoken more than you know my young friend, and I look forward to seeing more. Flash countered with a tone that let Naruto know just how big of a smirk he had on his face. But if they're Naruto started, only to get cut off as he woke up to find Kakashi staring down at him with a baleful eye. Hey kiddo. I've got the training picked out. You're going to learn how to duel, the Lord Master stated dryly as he started staggering out, looking like a man that had a few too many drinks. Letting out a heavy sigh, Naruto sat up, looked at the clothes he fell asleep in, and just shrugged. They would do as well as any other he'd brought along. Once they were outside, Naruto followed his teacher on his wandering, dizzying path out into the depths of the forests. Maybe he needed a little more rest before he passes out somewhere. Once they arrived at a clearing, Kakashi pulled out a red sealed scroll and waved it so Naruto could focus on it. This is a scroll of summoning for Justicars. Your opponent today is 5 of them. You either catch them, or they catch you. Have fun. Kakashi flicked out the scroll and 5 Justicars popped into the clearing, each identical to the last. Lots of latex, leather belts, and red leather whips. Naruto didn't wait for them to get a bead on him. His first move was one that had always served him well in the past. disappearing. One minute the ladies were eyeing him up for a size 7 scroll, and the next he was gone. If any of them got him, he would likely end up their slave for life. Hiding in the trees he smirked as he summoned forth a couple handfuls of chains. This was going to be interesting. This was going to be interesting, thought Haku as she watched Naruto beginning his training. It was nearly a perfect opportunity. Those fake Justicars provided her the perfect, delicious opening that she just had to exploit. So when one of them wandered away from the pack, she stunned them with her senbon needles, and borrowed their mask. A quick storage of them into a scroll later, with their spares being added to her belt. She was on the prowl for the blonde that she was going to tame. His teacher. Well, Master Zabuza never loses. Never. Leaping up into the air, he counted the scrolls that he'd captured already. 4 out of 5 in a matter of 6 minutes wasn't bad, but he knew that he had to do better. He'd have already been failed back at the academy, but it seemed that Kakashi didn't have the same grading scale as they did. Springing off the tree branch, he was shocked when a black scroll wrapped around where he'd just been. Tracking back to the source, he was surprised when he found that whoever it was vanished from view just after he spotted her. He didn't think that he was facing this level of Justicar, but he wasn't about to let her catch him. It was on now. Retrieving the 2 lengths of chain he'd been using to swing around the trees and tie up more than a couple of the Justicars until he could get his scroll deployed. It was time to utilize them for more entertaining means. His first step was to vanish again. On the opposite side of the playing field, Haku was silently fuming. For the first time, the one scroll Ice Princesses had missed. She didn't think she'd rusty since the mistress training program had been closed down by the Grand Master of the town. She had been the prized student in the Justicar classes, and as such earned the highest asking price at the slave auction she'd escaped from. It seemed that Naruto would indeed be a challenge, unlike she had originally presumed. A small smirk played out across her lips as she gave chase to the man that had become a preoccupation to her mind. She would capture him, and prove to Zabuza's leader that she was ready to become a full-fledged Justicar, and not just dress up for the role. A few shots of freezing water were meant to trap Naruto's foot on the branch, trunk, or patch of dirt he happened to be touching at that moment, but each of her shots seemed to be just a half-second off. Oh yes, he would be an excellent capture indeed, and might prove to be a worthy training partner to keep her Justicar skills honed to a keen edge. Leaping over a branch, she faltered for a moment, finding him missing. A second later she heard the warning clinks of the boy's chains trying to encircle her. Straightening out her body, she slipped out from the trap, barely clearing the last strands of her hair in time. Oh yes, he was a tricky one, as there was no sign of the master she was out to capture again. Naruto panted from his hiding spot, having sacrificed one of his chains in the attempt to snatch the more skilled Justicar as she cleared the blind jump. It hadn't worked, but he hadn't entirely expected it to, as she was nothing like what the others were. Briefly he wondered if Kakashi had summoned a real Justicar instead of the training ones, or worse still a real one had cut into the training, but she was wearing the same mask that the others had been. So that meant that she had to be a member of the right group, correct? After all, to steal a Justicar's mask. That was just asking for no ends of trouble, and even the stupidest of sluts knew better. Sighing silently, he pondered his next move as he catalogued all the tools he had at his disposal. He had a length of chain, a dozen throwing knives, a couple matches, and 10 old stink bombs that were just as likely to explode as to release the stink gases. But that could work. He just needs something quieter than the chains to capture this one. And that's when he saw it, sitting there with an angelic glow about it, in the clearing he'd just abandoned not a full minute ago. A shiny red leather whip, which he knew would slice through the air with nary a whisper until it made impact. But he'd have to break cover to get it. That's when the stupidest, most hair-brained scheme he'd ever imagined possible came to him. And since he didn't have a single other idea, he decided to go with it. A match strike later, the fuses on the smoke bombs were lit, and tossed into the area he'd seen her disappeared into. Sure enough, 3 of the 10 blew up instead of releasing a steady cloud of stink, but those 3 spread the cloud farther than he'd hoped them to originally, so it seemed luck was on his side today. Haku gasped as 3 loud explosions sounded around her, making her worry that he'd broken out explosive tags, but when she realized she was fine, she instead focused on the blonde currently running out from under some bushes she'd passed by. Firing off shots of her ice blasts, she tried to figure out what he was doing, doubling back in such an obvious fashion. There was nothing that could save him now, and he should have known it. Readying her scroll, she took a few more pot shots at his heels, deciding to continue the game as long as she could. And as soon as she tried to shoot at his heel once it contacted with the tree, a body-racking cough messed with her aim enough that she missed. What was that putrid, nausea-inducing odor that had her doubled over in a coughing fit? As her eyes were watering so badly she couldn't have seen her own feet, she relied on her other senses to keep track of the blonde that had reversed her direction, coming at her again. Popping free her second scroll, she wound back to deploy it, only to be forced to leap away as something struck the tree branch her feet were standing on. That's when she knew something was wrong. Her ascent was curtailed by a circle of leather around her ankle she knew to be a whip's lash, and a sudden jerk had her descending rapidly, and she knew that she'd misjudged Naruto. Her fingers came into contact with a piece of paper, and she had enough time for exactly one thought before blackness claimed her. I failed. Naruto was currently bent over, trying to catch his breath after succeeding in capturing all 5 of the trainer Justicars. Now he'd just collect this last scroll once the air cleared, pick up his tools, and shove the other 4 scrolls sideways up Kakashi's ass. What the hell was he thinking, slipping a high-level Justicar in on the first training day like that? Pushing off his knees, he began going around and collecting all the tools he'd used, starting with the chains, which went into his tools scroll with everything else since he hadn't learned how to return them to his body yet. Not that he was complaining, just being able to summon and release them from his body would have been beyond what he'd thought he would be able to pull off back in the academy. This was turning out to be an amazingly super special awesome training experience for a single whip mission though, so that's why he was sparing Kakashi the 5th scroll. Besides, he needed it as proof. This way he could get Kakashi punished properly for pulling such a hair-brained stunt. Speak of the devil, who should arrive just as he dislodged the 5th and final scroll's pin than the one-eyed pervert himself. Ma. Congratulations Naruto. You were faster than I expected. Shall we review your results? Yeah, let's. Naruto snarled out, tucking the 5th scroll away and pulling out the other 4, ready for anal insertion into one Kakashi Hitaki, Lord Master of Konohagakure, master of over 1,000 techniques, and avid fan of the entire Icha Icha series of novels. He needed something to fill up the room his ego didn't completely crush out after all. Kakashi gave him an almost serene eye smile as he unraveled the scroll that he'd received once Naruto'd used his final scroll. Uzumaki, Naruto. Master Level 2, Training Masters at Rank 4. 5 Justicars were deployed. The defeat and capture of said Justicars at a time of 7 minutes, 52 seconds is recorded. Additionally, the capture of Momi. Kakashi read, pausing at the word as his eye nearly bugged out of his skull. Naruto watched as he read over the lines twice, before staring at Naruto as though the blonde had just farted a rainbow. Naruto paused in his planned punishment of his trainer, something about the, additionally, line catching his attention. What do you mean, additionally capturing someone? I only caught 5 people wearing Justicar masks. Naruto groused petulantly as his revenge was ruined by someone's stupidity. After all, if Kakashi hadn't done it intentionally he couldn't really carry through with it, could he? Also, something else caught his attention from the beginning. Wait, Master Level 2? No way, I should still be a 4, maybe a 3 if I caught a slave. You sure you're reading that right? It was about this moment that Naruto's brain finally caught up with his mouth. Wait a minute. Additional capture. But if I only capture 5, then that last one was a real master's duel. Naruto. A female voice spoke from the trees, causing both the blonde and silver-haired masters to whip their heads around, just in time to see a judgeinatrix walk out from behind the tree branches. One I was rather fortunate to observe. If it wasn't for the fact it was hammering out a beat on his ribs, Naruto would have been fairly certain his heart was lodged somewhere in the vicinity of his voice box. A real, live judgeinatrix had been watching his duel, and was impressed. Kakashi on the other hand seemed slightly suspicious, until the woman jumped down and held out a black short scroll, which rolled out to reveal sanctioned orders by Supreme Master Sarutobi himself. And then he simply pulled out the lacquered box with the 2 masters Naruto'd caught the other day, and held it open to her respectfully. The 2 scrolls disappeared from the box and into slots on her belt silently, before she turned to face Naruto properly. If you would hand me the final scroll you used, please. Nodding numbly, Naruto handed off the other scrolls to Kakashi's waiting hands, and fumbled with the clasps holding the one containing the last prize. It took him half a minute longer than he'd have liked, but she didn't seem too overly annoyed at his fumbling. His hands shook as he held out the scroll to her, laying it flat across his palms to present it to her properly. She didn't touch it, instead took several minutes to study it quietly before folding Naruto's fingers over it again and using a single finger to push them back towards Naruto. A prized capture master Uzumaki, Haku Momichi, the judgeanatrix stated from behind her complete face mask, pausing as Naruto's eyes widened at the mention of Haku. Formerly of the Justicar training school in Kiri, at least until it was illegally closed along with all mistresses being deemed illegals. In recent years she has been illegally aiding a Master Zabuza Momichi in Master's duels as an unregistered Justicar. Her case shall remain under review until such time as you arrive in Konoha again. I do ask that you retrieve the training Justicar that she captured before coming after you Master Uzumaki presently so she may return to the academy for retraining. Naruto nodded dumbly as he tucked the scroll away, finally looking away from the woman long enough to look at the clasps he was struggling with. As the final one clicked into place, he felt a long, delicate, yet powerful latex-coated finger hook his chin and force him to look her directly into the mask. A single red eye stared at him from the field of white, and he could almost swear that she was searching for something deep inside of him. After a moment she released him, took a step back and gave them a deep bow from the waist. A rare master indeed you are Uzumaki, Naruto. A rare one indeed. I shall be following your advancement, personally. As she vanished from sight with barely a whisper, Naruto knew that his life was about to go from merely insane to absolutely fucking crazy with a side of batshit loco. Kakashi reacted first, kneeling to pick up a plain brown scroll that she'd left in her stead, with the word, orders, written neatly on the outside. Kakashi turned to regard the master that had become a constant source of surprise over the past few days. He'd known the blonde was something special when Sarutobi had praised him, all but calling him an apprentice, especially after it was revealed that Naruto was currently a target of the free hunt back home. First had been the restraint with Tanzo and the dealing with the alcohol, then the capture of the sadistic demon brothers using a technique that Kakashi himself had only seen once before, the interrogation of Tanzo without a single blow landed, the rescue of Kakashi at the last minute in the first fight with Zabuza, and now not only had he won an officially sanctioned master's duel without even knowing he was participating, but it had been his first solo duel ever, and it impressed a judgeanatrix. Kakashi had only managed that once, and he was a full Lord Master before it happened. No Master Uzumaki, you are something else. Kakashi murmured softly to the still stunned blonde, who promptly collapsed as his knees turned to jelly. Heck, he was certainly handling meeting a judgeanatrix for the first time better than most, after all. Most wet themselves in terror. As the poor mentally stressed blonde departed the crazy train, on the happy fun pass-out Land Express, Kakashi could only whisper. You are going to go farther than your father and mother ever could, and I hope to see every step of the way. Speaking of, a nice rest was just what the doctor ordered for Kakashi, and so he straightened out the unconscious blonde, and settled in under a nice shady tree, pulled out his favorite orange book and began reading. After all, a debriefing like this could wait until the poor kid was awake. He'd been through a lot recently. Waking up in a large pasture was a bit different than from what he'd expected when he passed out, but it was a pleasing change from the dark dungeon corridors. The trio of figures sitting down at a feast with a massive banner that read, "Congratulations," was a bit more immediate to his notice. Well, two were sitting, the third was currently kneeling in front of a pair of pet dishes. Lady Flash, what's going on here? Naruto asked, as if the answer wasn't completely obvious as the whiskers on his face. Never mind that, let's just celebrate. I have a couple questions for you, lady. Naruto settled into a chair that had been left at the head of the table for him, while the other two took up flanking positions, and Kitsune knelt at the other end of the table, in full view of Naruto. I take it you learned of my promotion? No, but that makes this even more of a reason to celebrate. The brown egg hatched and you're now a full-fledged master. Lady gushed while sliding over a huge bowl of ramen for Naruto to enjoy. Flash seemed to be beaming behind his mask as well, giving Naruto a few extra slices of beefsteak. We can take a look later if you want, my creator. It is a rare hatching indeed. I think you will be very pleased with it, Flash added as he piled up his own plate with food, his own bowl of ramen steaming away merrily. Lady seemed to be happy to join in the male member's eating habits, piling up her own plate and having an equally loaded bowl of ramen. Naruto sat in his chair, rubbing his chin in thought for a moment before he nodded. Yes, I think that'll be good. But I suspect I know the spirit that has hatched, also. Kitsune, have some lunch. The former glorious demon of death and destruction was shocked when Naruto spoke to her, and even more so when the two previously empty bowls filled themselves with cooked sliced chicken meat, and cool, clean water. After millennia of being stuck inside one host or another, and having nothing but chakra to sustain her, food was almost a foreign concept. Almost, but not quite. Her eyes shone with an unspoken amount of surprise and gratitude, that had Naruto smiling warmly in return. Unfortunately her pride stopped her from thanking him, and instead she merely bent over and began eating the chicken as she would have in her fox form. Naruto watched her eating for a few minutes, catching the slight smile of joy that crept into her smile at the corners. We will have to train her in human eating habits, I suppose, but she is being very well behaved. Maybe it's time for what, Master Uzumaki? Lady asked curiously as she lowered the bowl of ramen from her mask. Which Naruto was still uncertain of how she was eating through, but decided against asking about. Oh, I'm just thinking of rewarding her for being a good little slave. Naruto commented offhand, before scooping up his own bowl and slurping down a mass of noodles, broth, and toppings to stun Son Goku. A good slave would have thanked her master, Flash pointed out with his chopsticks waving over to Kitsune casually. They lasted in that direction until he snatched up a piece of grilled vegetable happily. But she has come far, maybe a reward is the proper step, my creator. Have you considered what you wish to give her? I have a couple ideas in mind. Naruto answered vaguely as he lowered his now empty bowl. He couldn't help but notice that Kitsune was paying attention to every word that was being said with a hopeful, almost pleading look to her eyes. It was fun playing with her like this, but he needed to stretch it out for a little longer. But that can wait until after the feast, and the inspection of the egg room, I think. Of course, my creator, his master spirit answered, realizing the game that Naruto was playing. The once mighty demon was now envisioning a lot of things that she thought humans would consider treats, having learned something of their thinking from her time spent in the human bodies. A casual glance over to the enigmatic lady confirmed that she had her suspicions brewing as much as he was loath to admit his own were. The young master seemed to be a natural at stirring up trouble. Reaching out for the last piece of meat, he was surprised to find it missing. Or rather, he found it on the end of Naruto's chopsticks, entering his mouth. Oh yeah, the kid was good. The feast ended after everything was eaten, and Kitsune even got a second helping, this time of vegetables. And while they were letting it settle, Naruto decided to get some answers to questions he'd thought of during the day. I was thinking, can I return the chains into me after they are out of me? I think it'd be easier to clean up after the fights. Also, can I form weights, spikes, hooks, or something to make them more useful? And different widths of chain would probably be good too. I cannot answer those, Master Uzumaki, Lady stated as she let out a heavy sigh. I only saw them in use a couple times, but I suspect that if you train up your control, you should be able to do as you wish with them. Quite so, control is important, especially with as much power as you have, my creator. Flash agreed with a firm nod as he sipped some drink that Naruto couldn't quite identify. Kitsune seemed to be content to stretch out on the grass, enjoying the warm sun on her latex-clad body, while Lady was keeping a careful eye on her. It amazed Naruto how well the former fox demon was adapting to life as a human. I think it's time to go to the egg room. Flash, if you'll lead? Naruto stated while pushing himself up and away from the table. Lady, if you will help Kitsune clean up and have her ready for me when we're done. The two spiritual helpers working for him simply nodded and went about their tasks. Naruto followed Flash through an archway of twisted vines, arriving in the egg room, which was now different than last time. For one, the brown egg was replaced by a caged Justicar, one that he felt was familiar for some reason. This one had a few things different than any of the others he'd seen previously. The brown color of her body was the first major distinction. But then there was the fact that she had a swirled circle mark on her collar with fox ears and a small foxtail sticking off the bottom. My personal seal. How'd? I haven't even gotten it confirmed with the guild yet. This is your mind. But might I suggest a slight change? You do not wish for a certain fox you're taming to get the wrong idea. Flash suggested as the seal swirled and replaced the fox features with tongues of flame flickering around the outer edge. The will of fire, born of an Uzumaki's heart. That looks even cooler. Naruto agreed as he leaned against the bars, studying the female that stood beyond, captured as though in the midst of taking off her mask. After a few minutes he frowned and thought, that reminds me of the fourth Supreme Master's seal. Does it now? I must say that I believe that you have more than earned it. For example, the fine specimen you have captured here. By her skills I would say she is a rank 2 or 3 Justicar. Flash explained while indicating the woman in the cage. They do not send them after masters on a mere one-crop opponents. In fact, most times you cannot face one of those down until you've reached the level where one-whip missions are the norm. Really? I didn't think I had surpassed him. Maybe I just got lucky? After all, she probably thought I was less of a challenge than I turned out to be. Naruto reasoned, trying to keep his idol upon the pedestal he'd once put him upon. It is possible. But look at the marks. She has the marks of a level 2 minimal Justicar. The spirit explained while pointing to the subtle whip-shaped engravings on the upper left arm's belt. This is Haku's dream? To be a Justicar. I don't know if I can give her that. Naruto mused while stroking the bar softly, missing her moans. Walking over to the remaining lavender egg, he smiled as she moaned softly at his gentle touch, teasing out a beautiful song that made his deepest heart a little happier with each passing second. That's when he noticed something interesting on the other side of the egg. There was a small black egg with a tiny golden implant of his newest seal. What's this? That is. I don't even know what that is. Flash answered while kneeling next to the tiny egg. I've never even heard about something like this. So, what happens with stage 2 for Haku? Naruto asked, pushing the strange egg off to the side of his mind, focusing instead on things of more immediate importance. While pushing it aside, save for putting it on his lap and petting the egg as it let out cute little purrs and moans. Stage 2 is a matter of you have become aware of her submission, or captured her, but have not accepted her as your slave yet. There are times when this stage is skipped, but it is important to know that there are cases where this stage is permanent. Also, remember that the key words for this stage is look, but don't touch. Naruto frowned at that last part, before setting the egg carefully into its holder and walking over to the cage housing Haku's stage 2 form. Why is that? I can just reach through the bars and… As he fit actions to words, a few things happened at once. The first was he was electrocuted, the second was that he was flung back, and the third is that he let out a few choice words about the pain. That's why. The spirit is open to you, but you have to accept it in your heart before it's yours. Flash explained after Naruto finally settled down from feeling like he'd been kicked in the kidneys, again. Ah, no touchy, got it. Naruto muttered after he gained a standing position, his hair sticking up even more than usual. Well, let's go find Lady, and give Kitsune her presents. As you wish, my creator, Flash answered, leading him back towards the way they came in, only to walk into the dungeon again. Instead of the implements of torture he'd grown accustomed to seeing on his arrival, he found instead Kitsune prostrate before a throne, with Lady standing off to one side, and Flash taking up his position on the other. Welcome Master Uzumaki, we have prepared for the gifts. Naruto smirked at the level of pomp and circumstance they'd given such a minor thing, but he figured it was a major step for Kitsune, so maybe giving it a bit of flavor like this was just what was needed. Settling into his throne, he looked down at the naked woman before him, and realized that there needed to be more than he originally thought. You know, part of your new life is being a normal human, and to learn that. I think a gift is in order, Naruto stated calmly as a black hobble skirt, wide-inch high heels, and a nice studded leather collar appeared upon the woman before him. But you should never forget your former sins. As he said this last part, black-tipped fox ears pushed out through the burnt orange hair. Flicking his feeling emerged into them, and a new realm of hearing opened to her. It hadn't even been a week since losing her former status, but she couldn't imagine how much her new human form had been limited in the realm of hearing. These were amazing, and they were all thanks to the man she had called a meatbag. Guilt and shame flooded into her as she lowered her head and ears in submission, lacking even the normal growl of defiance she'd shown to this date. He had given her a second chance, not stolen her glory from her. She might have been his slave, but she had never realized just how free she felt until that very moment. She was his slave, he was her master, and she liked it that way. "There you go, Kitsune, now keep being a good girl, alright?" Naruto whispered, having gotten up from his throne and knelt next to her with only a whisper of noise. Even before she realized it, he was petting her and it felt magnificent. Haku hadn't expected much of anything after being sealed away, and it was nearly all that she'd expected. There was black, and for a little splash of difference, black. But there was no pain, no hunger, no pleasure, in fact no movement at all. She was bound against any action she could take, in an almost smothering syrupy blackness. She couldn't feel them, but she could hear and smell the binds. The sounds of the creaking leather, squeaking vinyl, clinking chains, and the whisper-quiet squeaks of latex all told her that she was bound in layers upon layers gear, and a spider web of chains suspending her. She could even smell the treated leather, the teasing scent of vinyl, and the cool metallic scent of the chains and clamps. If she had to pick something that annoyed her the most, it was the removal of her sense of touch. She knew what she should be feeling, could almost feel the echoes of the sensory input she should be feeling. But it was denied to her. That self-same lack of feelings made her wonder what had happened. Waiting in that web of leather, chains, and various other materials, she felt no changes, no sensation of moving scrolls, no sudden increase in feelings. Nothing, just nothing. She'd been in here for several days, hadn't she? That was more than long enough for the judgenatrix to arrive and take her in for the charges levied against her. So why hadn't she moved scrolls yet? Instead of focusing on the lack of feelings and the worrisome lack of transfer, she focused on the last time she failed. It had been 1 week before she was supposed to have graduated with honors from the Justicar program back home. She had fought free of the initial sweeps of the enforcers to the Grand Master's new law banning mistresses. Her self-appointed mission was to find the resistance and turn her services over to them. She'd even escaped 2 attempts to ensnare her by false representatives, but the third one had been the charm it seemed. The master had been a skilled actor, even had slaves acting as mistresses over other slaves, both male and female, to ensure her capture. 1 minute she was going to meet up with the head of the mistress's resistance, the next she was on her stomach with Master Curry smirking right into her face. "Foolish girl, did you really think anyone would want someone as weak and gullible as you?" The next couple days were a blend of shame and horror as she was stripped, whipped, beaten, physically degraded and violated in every way save the one that would lower her selling price in front of eager crowds that just cheered on her captors. By the end of the few days she was held, she doubted anyone would ever see anything of worth in her. And that's when she had first met the man that found something redeeming in her. He talked to her as an equal, restored her sense of worth to her, and gave her hope. One day, he came, killed the guards and many of the clients, and unchained her and the rest of the slaves, even providing them access to the room that housed simple clothing. On that day she had been dressed up as a pony girl, feeling painfully full as with the tail plug in her ass, being bid upon by 3 cruel masters in particular. One had already collected 5 others similarly dressed slaves, looking to finish up a carriage team. The rumors about him were bad, and the crying slaves behind him showed Haku that she wasn't the only one that knew it. Another one had been a horse rancher, and was looking for a girl to aid in the collection of viable seminal fluids for him to sell. She knew that if she'd gone to him, she would have been broken in under a week, and still used until she died. She might last a month with him, but that was still better than the third and final man. He was a vile pig of a man, that had been sanctioned against by the guild for many years for his use of girls as meat. The 2 plumper girls behind him, she knew would end up in ovens by the end of the day, but he proclaimed he still needed a girl for the spit. It was during the bidding on her that Master Zabuza showed up, decapitating the 3 men that had been holding a bidding war over her. And then the bloodbath started. Not even 5 minutes after it started, it was over, and all the slave girls were freed. He turned on the fire sprinklers to hose them off, and slashed open the door barring them access to clothes. Everyone but Haku surged in to grab anything they could, before disappearing towards the High no Kuni borders. Haku hadn't been forced to go with the others as Master Zabuza provided her with an outfit chosen specifically for her. The instant she saw the latex and leather belts, she knew what it was. He was giving her a chance at being a Justicar, and she more than gladly took up her mask in his service. But she'd failed again, and here she was, floating in an endless sea of blackness, unable to move, unable to feel, only able to think. Naruto woke about as suddenly as he'd fallen asleep, still laid out in the middle of the clearing where he'd won his first master's duel. A look at the sun alerted to the fact that he'd passed out for about 2 hours, and the flipping of a page told him exactly what Kakashi'd been doing. "Ma, sleep well?" "Yeah. Wonderful. Had a dream about a judgeinatrix saying she was impressed by my fight with a real Justicar that slipped in while I was training," Naruto stated calmly while debating force-feeding Kakashi that book up his backside. "But other than that, it was good. And how's your novel?" "A bit dry, but it's getting to a good part," Kakashi stated while marking his place in the book. "I believe that a debriefing is in order. Especially about the unexpected real duel." Naruto sighed heavily as he realized just how completely nuts this was going to sound. Swallowing the pride he had in the public opinion of his sanity, Naruto began to give as complete of a tale of his actions as he could. Throughout it all, Kakashi only watched him with a bored look. At the end, Kakashi sighed heavily as the blonde finished and held up the scroll holding his capture. "Well, that is pretty much insane, but I believe you." "Really? 'Cause I fought it, and I'm kinda doubting my sanity on it," Naruto answered while trying to figure out everything that happened in the fight. He was pretty sure that some supernatural force had to be playing with luck to keep it in his favor, or something. "Let's just go back to the house, you talk to Haku, and get my summoned Justicar back," Kakashi stated while dusting himself off. As Naruto joined him in walking back to the house, he chuckled and put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Remind me to tell you sometime about a few of my duels. Yours is actually fairly mild. I must commend you on your use of the whip, so I think you should keep it for now." "For now? But it's a Justicar's whip," Naruto asked while looking at the red leather whip in his hands. "From what you've told me, you'll have the rare honor of presenting it to a Justicar herself soon enough," Kakashi replied with a soft chuckle to his voice. "But for now, just keep it in good condition, and if the situation comes for you to use it, go for it. Remember, a master's tools are what he can use. These are more than a fight for your freedom, and now that of your little slave. Zabuza doesn't duel to capture his opponent. Yeah. Just so long as that judgeinatrix doesn't take it out on me for using it," Naruto grumbled hotly while looking around nervously. "Seriously though. What's with a judgeinatrix getting here that fast? It took us 2 days to get to those masters in the forest, and another 2 or 3 to get here. They have special routes to use in case of emergency. I've only seen them once, and they make the stone monolith look like a child's tea house. If you ever see the inside of there, I will pray for your soul," Kakashi stated calmly while they walked, and Naruto had to wonder just how scary the insides of the judgeinatrix's domain could be, and what Kakashi had done to wind up inside there. I see. So, I get your training Justicar back. She goes to that training school. Does she need her mask back?" Naruto asked, changing the subject quickly, not wanting to see where his mind might lead to if given enough free rein. "Well, yeah, I think that'd be the right thing to do. If she doesn't have her mask on, don't look at her face, okay? There's some law that says that if anyone sees their face, there's grave penalties or something. I'd have to look it up," Kakashi stated after they arrived at the back door to the house. "Zabuza will likely be down for a bit longer without his companion to aid his healing, but I think I want you to focus on your chains a bit more. Try out some new things. I'll keep tabs on you, but I think you will learn best if I give you free rein." "Yes sir," Naruto answered, holding the door for the higher-ranked master. Once inside he went up to the bedroom they'd been given and locked the door and windows, leaving one unlocked on an idea he had. Clearing a small spot in the middle of the room, he unfurled the scroll and let Haku tumble out. "Welcome back to the waking world. Did you enjoy your stay at Casa de la Scroll?" Haku glared at the man that had trapped her. She'd just lost everything she'd ever prided herself on, and here he was making jokes. But she was weaponless, and most likely would be defeated by him if she fought him while enraged. Sighing, she decided to counter his humor with her own. "Yes, I did, thank you. Though you must get a new pool boy." To her surprise, he just chuckled and shook his head. "You're different than I was expecting. A fake Justicar, due to one man's illegal ruling, forced to live on the run with a man that couldn't truly appreciate your beauty, skills, and grace. I dare say when I get back to Konoha, I'll have to beat the Justicar core off with a stick to keep you as my slave." Haku had a steady blush burning on her cheeks, up until he mentioned that last word. Slave? I'm a slave, that's right. You challenged me in an officially sanctioned master's duel, and since no wager was placed, the judgeinatrix decided to let me keep you, as your case is under review, Naruto stated calmly while he knelt next to the shell-shocked brunette. Look, I know you don't want to betray Zabuza, but he and Gato are both going to have to pay. If you stay with me I can protect you as best I can. Why would you do that for me? I read your file. It wasn't right what happened, and I think you got a raw deal there. But I'll leave the choice to you. Naruto answered while setting a collar at her knees, turning so his emblem is pointed towards her. I have to take Kakashi back his Justicar, if you'd give her back, and her mask. Haku produced the two things, holding them out on the flats of her palms, hiding the fact that she was looking down at the collar with wide, terrified eyes. Scooping them up, Naruto turned to leave. At the door, he turned his head back slightly to talk to Haku. If it gets too stuffy in here, go ahead and open that window over there. The tree blocks most of the sun, but there should be a nice breeze. They should trim back the branches though, they almost touch the window. And with that, he was out of the room, leaving Haku with two clear, if unspoken choices. Become Naruto's slave and be protected. Maybe even become a full-fledged Justicar herself. Or go back to Zabuza and keep playing pretend. But Zabuza loved her, had saved her from the slave lines, and couldn't just abandon him like that. Could she? Was Naruto just lying to get her to leave him, and would then leave her trapped in a scroll for the rest of her life? Zabuza smirked as he looked at the foolish Kakashi and his junior partner standing on the bridge waiting for him. They thought that they had been victorious, but his Justicar and adopted daughter Haku had returned to him, and had helped him recover faster than they would have thought. And now they were ripe for the plucking, especially since the blonde thought he held Haku in a scroll, but she had managed to get free at the last minute. The fight that had led to the deception and subsequent night away from Zabuza had resulted in the girl getting 10 strokes with the back of her hairbrush, a quarter of the normal punishment, since it actually served to further their goals, and in fact ensured that the judgeinatrix thought that Haku had been captured and turned over to them. He could be merciful when it mattered, but still the punishment had to happen in order for Haku to learn her lesson about timing and obeying him. It was time to make them pay for making him worry, and for even thinking of trying to capture his Haku. So he wouldn't kill them today, oh no, he'd given Haku 2 scrolls especially for them. He would take Kakashi and torment him for months before finally granting him the sweet release of death. The blonde would become the personal plaything of Haku, as he'd promised when she rejoined him. She had been passionate about that point, and provided that he would be an excellent partner to keep her skills honed against, and he couldn't just ignore that fact. So he had ceded the point, and loved every moment of the shining joy in her eyes. Maybe it would assuage a little of the guilt he felt over missing her birthday the year before. They had been caught in the middle of an operation to capture them, but even still he usually got her something to celebrate the day with. It had just slipped his mind, and he hated himself for it. Freeing his blade from its holster, he chuckled grimly as he knew the fight would be over in under 15 minutes, after that Gato would be here to pay him. After that he could retire for a while to deal with Kakashi and let Haku have her fun with the brat. Naruto sighed as he waited anxiously for something. Anything to happen. They'd been reporting to the bridge every morning for the past week and a half, knowing that Haku would have Zabuza healed and fighting soon enough. But today was different. Today he could sense the presence of a he'd felt before, and one that drew a smile he'd only worn before when playing with his eggs. Turning around he was about to complain to Kakashi when a whistling noise filled the air. At the last second he managed to set up an array of chains that snatched the thrown blade aimed straight at his back. They redirected its flight to leave it embedded into the ground. Well, that's not very nice. Couldn't we at least once face these two with a properly declared challenge? Naruto. Don't you know that such people seldom actually declare their challenges? Kakashi commented while putting away his book. And it was getting to such a wonderful part of the story. The appearance of Zabuza and Haku seemed like a minor note when compared to the one that had appeared immediately after them, standing on the very tip of the hilt as though she'd been there all along. The judgeinatrix looked between the groups and nodded solemnly. This officially sanctioned match seems to have all the players at the ready. The wager is as follows. Lord Master Hitaki, Kakashi, and Master Uzumaki, Naruto and all their properties, and the family and properties of traitor Tanzo, against the representative of the illegal Grand Master Gato, the Lord Master Momichi, Zabuza, the entirety of the wave slave market, and all properties controlled by them. Commence the battle. And with that she was gone from the field, but everyone knew that she was still watching. Zabuza smirked behind his latex bandages covering his mouth as he retrieved his blade. If a judgeinatrix was present, it just meant that when he won, he would have another week before they tried to track him again. Focusing on the Lord Master, his smirk grew into a full grin as he thought of what he was going to do to that arrogant jerk, facing him and his personal Justicar with only that wet behind-the-ear master as backup. They would pay for this foolishness. Charging forward he slashed at Kakashi, only to find his blade turned at the last second by a length of barbed chain from the blonde. Those chains were becoming a major annoyance, but simply summoning chains from some scroll wasn't going to win this battle. After all, the brat would run out, and then there would be nothing more to him. But where was Haku? She should have been keeping that brat busy while he dealt with the silver-haired trouser stain. Ah, there she was, her ice blasts were slowing down those chains, so now he could focus on the idiot Kakashi. Slashing at the idiot again, he snarled in frustration as he missed by barely inches, while the idiot just kept talking about weird things. So is that sword really compensating for something? Just look how big it is, you have to wonder. Oh, that's it, he was going to suffer double for those little remarks. Soon, very soon he would be sealed up into a scroll and would be completely and utterly at Zabuza's lacking mercy. Winding back to slash at Kakashi, he flipped the blade so the blunt side would hit him, and found out two things at that moment. One was that his back foot was frozen to the ground, and two, Haku was standing before him without her mask, tears in her eyes, and wearing a strange collar about her neck. "I'm sorry, Master Zabuza." That's when he noticed the scroll unrolling at his foot, and he knew it wasn't one of the fakes he'd given Haku. Bowing his head, he let out a dry chuckle. "That's how it goes. Good job, Haku." The oiled man finished, as he heard the creaking of leather, and felt the binds pulling him into a spread eagle position. They claimed her. They really, actually claimed her. And with that, the first tear he'd shed in years rolled down his cheeks. Not for himself, but for the little girl that he'd saved those years ago. She had too much talent to be broken like that. That's when the first jolt of pain struck, the physical pain that he could fight against. That told him he was alive. Not the emotional pain that left him dead inside. The fight had been fast and furious, with a lot of flash and noise. It had even lasted a full 5 minutes. But then there was nothing save a scroll on the ground, Haku bent over it crying, Naruto trying to console her, and Kakashi watching on silently. A minute into Haku's mourning, the judgeinatrix returned to collect the scroll. "I am sorry you had to do that, Jew. Slave Haku. But the fight is not yet ended. Round 2 has arrived." As the fog lifted itself away, to reveal the mass of masters surrounding Gato, the effects it had on the combatants was nearly instantaneous. Haku stood up, slipping her mask into place over her face, all hesitation removed from her body. Kakashi eyed up the competition with a little trepidation, as he knew that against that many, all three of their techniques would do little. Naruto started chuckling as though he'd lost his mind, before turning to face Kakashi. "Hey, do you have something to launch things with?" Kakashi blinked at the odd request, before pulling out a storage scroll and removing a simple leather sling from it, holding it up lamely with a shrug. Naruto's grin only widened upon seeing it, and snatched up the leather strap with a laugh of mirth. Perfect. What happened next shocked Kakashi, and he was pretty sure the two people wearing full masks were similarly shocked, as Naruto pulled out balls from one of the storage scrolls he'd packed. The balls would enter the sling and be flung out as fast as he could get them up to speed. In the middle of the air, the balls would open up and a mesh of chains would be revealed with weights on the edges forming up the bulk of the ball. Kakashi suspected that the chains were too fine to do much, but they seemed to hold down several men in a single net, opening up channels of attack. Haku seemed to take advantage of the distraction that Naruto was forming to literally freeze men into place on the bridge. "Oh." Kakashi smirked as he realized what the youngsters were doing, and pulled out a scroll of his own. "Didn't think I would use these guys." Unfurling with a snap of his wrist, he unleashed the dozen dogs in his pack to help even the odds further. He waited a few minutes to see how the battle was faring before pulling out a whip of his own and rushing into battle. "Gato." Gato was ready to piss his pants as he saw his massive group of masters and mercenaries get whittled down by those three without any mercy. Already more than a couple of them were peeling off and running away. He couldn't do that himself, as the rest of these men would turn on him in a heartbeat if they saw that. No, he had to lead them through to victory, especially if they could capture that Judgenatrix. Having one of them under him would be a major coup against the guild. That's about when the first lash of pain hit, or rather a weight from one of those damn nets struck him square on his nose, sending him staggering back with blood flowing out freely. He felt a strange numbness from one of his legs just before an icy chill alerted him to the fact he was ensnared in that bitch's ice trap. Looking around, he realized just how grossly he'd misjudged the situation. Of all 100 men he'd brought along, there was one standing under his own power. And he was that one. The trio that had brought down his fabulous, magnificent slave ring were walking over, the traitorous slut pulling out one of those damned black scrolls. This one he could see had the seals for Konoha covering it. The shorter blonde one was glaring daggers, twirling a hook-covered weighted chain around at his side slowly. The Lord Master he knew as Kakashi was petting those demons he called dogs with a strange smile that had his visible eye curving upwards. "Come to gloat, have you? Or to finish me off?" "No, to say goodbye," was all the Ice Princess stated before snapping out the scroll and sealing away the head of the group. Looking around, they saw the defeated and demoralized look in the eyes of the remaining masters, and one question rang through their minds, even as Naruto asked it. "What the hell do we do with all of them?" "I believe that I have a remedy for that, Master Uzumaki," the Judgenatrix stated while collecting the scroll containing Gato. With a slight flourish she indicated the far end of the bridge, where from the woods found there emerged a half-dozen Justicars pulling a cart loaded with black, seal-covered scrolls. "Will this suffice?" The three that fought the battle all looked over at the arrival of the Justicars, and thankfully none of them said anything, but apparently while Kakashi was thinking, "What? We had backup and she didn't say jack shit?" His face had given away his thoughts. For the Judgenatrix leaned against his shoulder and whispered in his ear softly. "Would you question a Judgenatrix again, Lord Master Hitaki?" the woman asked, sending shivers along Kakashi's spine as flashbacks to the last time ran through his mind. A frantic shake of his head was enough to get the other two moving to go collect scrolls and help clean up. When he heard, "I thought this mission was strictly for Kakashi and Naruto alone. Who went ahead? They're gonna be in trouble." From one of the Justicars, he knew something was up, and suspected that it was coming from the Supreme Master himself this time. The cleanup took less than an hour, and even then they had a few that were knocked out and tied to the cart. Apparently there were more detainees than there were scrolls to carry them back. For some reason Kakashi walked up to each and assured they'd be knocked out for the entire duration of the trip. The trio had been pulled aside when the other Justicars departed with a few waves and offers to join them at a bar for drinks after debriefing. Once they were alone again, the Judgenatrix sighed heavily as she leaned against the bridge's support struts. "I believe that there is an explanation to you masters, and Slave Haku should be welcomed to hear it as well. As you know, the guild is active in most nations, save ones like Kiri no Kuni, where the leadership has rejected our rulership for individual reasons. The reason I did not bring out the other Justicars until I did, was until that time they had no jurisdiction, and I merely had it over the two of you. When we took over control of Wave, it became Konoha's sovereign territories." Kakashi suggested with a curious tone to his voice. "I see. What are we going to do with all the slaves and things we just picked up?" Naruto asked curiously as he scratched the back of his head. "I mean, I'm just a level 2 master. I can't deal with that many. And how many of them are not even willing to be a part of the society? I wouldn't feel right forcing someone into slavery like that." The stiffening of Haku's shoulders was barely noticed by the Judgenatrix, but she decided to instead answer his question. "We shall be reviewing their status, and if they wish to leave, there shall be rehabilitation time. If the two of the masters approve. The guild would like to set up a center here to facilitate the absorption of the land into our jurisdiction. Until then I'm afraid you will be granted no additional slaves until such time as we can assess the status of the others." Yeah, I guess that makes sense," Naruto offered while scratching the back of his head, pointing towards Wave. "So, you guys are making a place there, and while we technically own this place, you're in charge?" "That is correct, Master Uzumaki," the Judgenatrix answered with a slight nod of her masked face. If you and Lord Master Kakashi wish, you could give over waived our ownership. We will consider it, ma'am. Kakashi stated calmly after the group grew silent. Is there anything further you need us for before we make our way towards Konoha? I would ask that you remain here until the guild can set up the base of operations. I must go back to the Judgenatrix headquarters and begin processing Zabuza, Gato, and the others. Ma'am. Could you look into Zabuza's reasons for his actions and take them into account before passing judgment? Naruto asked, hearing the sharp draw of breath from Haku, and knowing that she still loved him, despite everything he'd done. He was risking a lot by asking this, and it seemed that he was more than willing to risk that for people. I shall see what I can do, Master Uzumaki. The masked woman stated with a tone that suggested pride in her voice. Before I go, I have some matters to address with this group. Slave Haku, for now, your charges have been withdrawn. Also, I will look into the matters regarding your prior training. You shall be hearing from us again. Naruto patted Haku on the shoulder lightly, giving her a warm smile as she turned to look back at him. However, I'm afraid we're going to have to take your mask and outfit. Understood, Judgenatrix, Haku stated quietly, with her head lowered, her voice oddly small. Can that wait until I can get her something, ma'am? I don't think having her go around naked would be a good idea. Naruto offered worriedly while rubbing the girl's shoulders gently. You ask much, Master Uzumaki, but it is agreeable. The woman answered calmly with a slight nod of her head. As for you, Master Uzumaki, I feel that your level 2 master rank might be subject to change. I will personally recommend you for advancement to level 1 master. And I believe Supreme Master Sarutobi shall be most pleased to hear of your progress. Naruto's eyes nearly bugged out of his skull as he realized that in one mission he has gone from unranked to just under gaining his Lord Master status. For the first time in nearly anyone present's memory, Naruto was speechless. Little did they realize just how rare this event would be, so they should have enjoyed it a lot more. And finally, Teacher Amino sends his regards to you, Master Uzumaki. And to Lord Master Hitaki he suggests that not a single hair be harmed on the young master's head. The Judgenatrix finished with a strangely baffled tone. I trust you understand what he meant. As Kakashi nodded, the others all noted that every inch of his exposed skin was pale white, and a cold sweat had broken out upon his brow. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.